Labas rytas. Prašom visus įsitaisyti patogiai ir pradėsim mūsų konferenciją. Ir norėčiau konferencijos atidarimui pakviesti gerbiamą Algirdą Jankauską, kuris yra pagrindinis šios konferencijos organizatorius ir yra vyskupo Matijaus Valančiaus Vilkaviškio vyskupijos Blaivystės sąjūdžio Kazlų Rūdos skyriaus pirmininkas. Taigi, prašom gerbiamas Algirdai.
Ačiū. Labas rytas, gerbiamosios ponios ir gerbiamieji ponai, svečiai, visi konferencijos dalyviai. Tarptautinė konferencija Šiaurės ir Baltijos šalys prieš narkotikus. Geroji praktika vykdant jaunimo žalingų įpročių prevenciją ir kontrolę skelbiu atidaryta. Konferenciją finansuoja Užsienio reikalų ministerija, Šiaurės ministrų taryba, taip pat mums pagelbėjo visuomenės gerovės institutas, na ir žinoma jūs visi dalyvaujantieji su bent tokiu simbolišku dalyvių mokesčių. Kadangi konferencija 2 dienų, tai ji, kaip sakoma, tikrai tų lėšų reikia. Bet noriu aš jūs visus pasveikinti, palinkėti darbingos dienos, ne tik šios, bet ir ateinančios dienos. Ir tikiu, kad ši konferencija jums bus tikrai labai naudinga ir mums visiems ji bus naudinga. Labai ačiū. Labai ačiū.
Ačiū gerbiamam Algirdui. Ir pirmoji mūsų daly numatyta šventiniai dalykai ir smagu yra pradėti visada nuo pasveikinimų. Ir labai džiaugiamės turėdami šiandien daug garbingų svečių. Ir pirmajam sveikinimo žodžiui norėčiau pakviesti Šiaurės ministrų tarybos biuro direktorių Bo Harald Tilberg. So please, Harald, floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I hope that soon everyone has found his or her seat. So, Vice Mayor, Member of Parliament, distinguished guests, organizers, dear friends, I wish you most welcome to the conference Nordic and Baltic Countries Against Drugs, with a focus on youth and prevention, as I understand. A special welcome, of course, to our foreign guests. Welcome to Lithuania. Myself, I'm a guest here in Marijampolė, in a way. The Nordic Council of Ministers office is based in Vilnius. So I had a nice drive here this morning to Marijampolė. It's a wonderful morning. Sun was rising, and now it's not so wonderful anymore, but it was. But I'm really happy that I choose to make this trip this morning to see all you people gathered here. And as a representative of a Nordic organization, it's of course great to see that Nordic representatives and specialists from, I think, almost all Nordic countries have gathered here today. And furthermore, that we have also a speaker from one of our Nordic institutions, Nordic Welfare Center. And even more, representatives of a region in the broader sense, also Belarus and Poland, as I understand. So I understand that I have only 5 minutes, so I will not talk at length. The topic today is, of course, well, the topics maybe today are of great importance, no doubt about that. They're relevant for the Nordic Council Ministers' agenda, relevant for the cooperation. But I still would like to emphasize what the Nordic Council of Ministers does in the region to promote NGO cooperation, to strengthen civil society. We have 2 programs for civil society cooperation. The small program for the Nordic Baltic region and the bigger program for the whole Baltic Sea region, where also Belarusian and Polish partners are eligible to apply. So we are really glad that we have had the possibility to support this initiative, which is now taking place. The program seems really solid, the 2 days program, and it will be really an exchange of ideas. I think this will really be possible to accomplish something, to achieve good results. Myself, unfortunately, I will have to head back to Vilnius today, but I hope to meet some of you at least in the coffee break. And finally, I would like to thank, of course, all the other partners who have made this possible: the Lithuanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Lithuanian EU Presidency, and everyone else. And of course, first and foremost, I would like to thank the organizers for this great project. So, I wish you 2 nice days, 2 nice, productive and interesting days, and thank you for your attention.
Dėkojam Bo Harald Tilberg už sveikinimą. Ir dabar norėtumėm pakviesti sveikinimo žodį tart mūsų nuolatinius draugus ir partnerius iš Švietimo ir mokslo ministerijos. Tai norėčiau pakviesti gerbiamą daktarą Rolandą Zuozą. Prašom.
Labas rytas visiems. Iš tikrųjų noriu visus konferencijos dalyvius, organizatorius pasveikinti Švietimo ir mokslo ministerijos vardu. Noriu padėkoti pirmiausiai Motiejaus vyskupo Valančiaus Blaivystės sąjūdžiui ir netgi vieno skyriaus, Kazlų Rūdos skyriaus organizuojamas renginys kartu su partijos tikrai bus puikus. Na, žinoma, visiems partneriams, Šiaurės ministrų tarybos biurui Lietuvoje, Nacionaliai tabako ir alkoholio kontrolės koalicijai, Užsienio reikalų ministerijai. Aišku, Lietuva pirmininkauja Europos Sąjungoje ir manau, kad šita tema yra svarbi visai Europoje, šiaurės šalims. Iš tikrųjų, kalbam apie tai, kad svarbu šitoje srityje prieinamumo, reklamos mažinimas, švietimui liktai bandoma sumenkinti, pasakyti, kad net tiek svarbu švietimas, bet turim kontrolę, prieinamumu, reklama daugiau skirti dėmesio, tačiau matyti švietimo kaip pačios sistemos svarbumas išlieka be galo svarbus. Iš tikrųjų, mūsų jaunimas nėra geroje situacijoje, kalbant apie žalingus įpročius. Iš tikrųjų, Švietimo ministerija tokiu atveju organizuoja ir ESPA tyrimus, kurių rezultatus pristatome visuomenėje. Bet manau, šioje konferencijoje svarbiausia yra gerosios patirties pasidalinimą šiaurės šalių. Matau, kad pranešimai Suomijos, Islandijos, Norvegijos, taip pat kolegų iš Baltarusijos, mūsų specialistų. Vis dėlto kokios efektyviausios priemonės taikant tikslinės programas mokyklose žalingų įpročių prevencijai. Švietimiečiai visi žino, kad mes ugdom holistiniu požiūriu gyvenimo įgūdžius, asmenybę, kuri būtų atspari žalingiems įpročiams, kad turėtų tvirtas nuostatas, vertybės, bet ne visą laiką, aišku, pavyksta ir paauglystės amžius, tam tikri stresai, ekonominė padėtis, rizikos grupės vaikai, internetas tas pats, reklama daro savo ir mes nežinom, kas bus rytoj, kaip keisis informacinės technologijos, atsiranda elektroninės cigaretės. Vakar atsidariau Lietuvos televizijos mediją tinklapį, pasižiūrėti vienos laidos įrašo, tai man prieš tai pasiūlė viskio išgerti reklama. Kitą atsidariau puslapį, taip pat interneto Lietuvos ryto norėjau paskaityti žinias, ten degtinės pasiūlė iš pradžių išgerti didžiausias butelys šone reklamos. Ir iš tikrųjų dabar aktualu, kadangi Seimas tuoj svarstys alkoholio kontrolės pataisas. Aš pats asmeniškai, kaip ne politikas, kaip valstybės tarnautojas, esu giliai įsitikinęs, kad būtina visiškai uždrausti alkoholio reklamą, bet kokiuose tinklapiuose, televizijoje, radijoje, spaudoje. Ta patį padarėm su tabaku ir nieko neatsitiko. Nežinau, rūko mažiau, aišku, kiti dalykai, bet su tabaku ta pati buvo problema. Gal silpnesnės leiskim reklamuoti, gal tik tai naktį, gal tik tai rytą, gal tik tai laikraščiuose, bet buvo pasiektas sprendimas, kad tabako reklama Lietuvoje visiškai uždrausta. Manau, kad tai irgi yra svarbu ir mūsų vaikams, ir suaugusiems, ir visiems kartu. Keletą žodžių apie šitos vyriausybės planus. Iš tikrųjų, švietimo srityje numatoma parengti, manau, svarbu yra neformaliojo vaikų švietimo finansavimo tobulinimo planą. Kuo daugiau vaikai užimti po pamokų, taip pat, manau, yra svarbu ir įtakoja jų pasirinkimą, ką veikti po pamokų. Tai yra gana stipri žalingų įpročių prevencija. Numatoma, jeigu bus politiniai sprendimai, pridėti pinigų neformaliam vaikų ugdymui, kurie ugdosi savo kompetencijos, atsparumą žalingiam įpročiam, gyvenimo įgūdžius per neformalų ugdymą. Nuo 15 metų pridėti savivaldybėms papildomų lėšų per mokinio krepšelį neformaliam ugdymui, kad galėtų išplėtoti neformalų ugdymą ir tinklą. Ir aišku, svarbu, kad Švietimo ir mokslo ministerija yra parengus ir nuo rugsėjo 1 dienos mokyklose yra įdiegiama sveikatos ugdymo bendroji programa, per kurią pagal amžiaus tarpsnius yra integruotai ir yra numatytos privalomos valandos skirtos sveikatos ugdymui. Manau, tai taip pat daro didelę įtaką, jeigu šnekam tą temą apie žalingų įpročių prevenciją ir kontrolę. Baigdamas noriu palinkėti jums iš tikrųjų pasidalinti gerąją patirtimi, kurios turi šiaurės šalis, kiti kolegos, mūsų partneriai iš sveikatos apsaugos, socialinės ir darbo, narkotikų kontrolės departamento, taip pat mokslininkai, Marijampolės savivaldybės atstovai. Noriu padėkoti ir Marijampolės rajono vadovams, kad priema mus Marijampolė. Iš tikrųjų, dažniausiai konferencijos Vilniuje būna ir aš tikrai noriu pasveikinti Marijampolę, kad susirinkome regiono centre, svarbiame centre ir galime šitą konferenciją organizuoti. Visiems noriu palinkėti sveikatos, gero renginio ir pateikti rekomendacijas švietimo vadybininkams, kitų sričių vadybininkams, kaip tą gerą patirtį perkelti švietimo srityje, konkrečiai į mokyklas, konkrečiai prie kiekvieno vaiko. Gero darbo ir ačiū uždėmesi.
Ačiū gerbiamam daktarui Suozai už gražų sveikinimą ir už iš tikrųjų tokią labai stiprią ir palaikančią poziciją iš švietimiečių. Iš tikrųjų žinom, kiek daug jūs yra lūkesčių sudėta ir kitą kartą sudėtinga yra visus ir patenkinti, nes kiekvienas savo srity labai daug tikisi švietimo sistemos, tiek sveikatos specialistai, tiek kitų sričių specialistai. Tai ačiū, kad jūs šiandien radot laiko atvažiuoti, pabūti su mumis. Ir dabar norėčiau pakviesti perduoti sveikinimo žodį, taip suprantu, tiesiai iš ministro lūpų. Tai prašom, iš sveikatos ministerijos sveikinimo žodį.
Suteikta man didžiulė garbė šiandien sveikatos apsaugos ministro Vytenio Povilo Andriukaičio pasveikinti šios dienos konferenciją. Na ir buvo, manau, kad jau pirmieji žodžiai pasakyti, kad Lietuvoje problema yra nepaprastai aštri. Ir tiek, kad mūsų kartos, kurie esam, mano bendramžiai, tikrai tokių problemų nežinojom, negirdėjom, nors dirbom tą darbą ir medikai visada pamatom galbūt pirmieji rezultatus. Ir nepaprastai džiugu, kad šiandien susirinko tokia didžiulė garbinga auditorija ir dalyvauja visos žinybos, nuo kurių priklauso mūsų jaunimo ateitis. Jeigu mes anksčiau kalbėdavom tik tai vieni medikai ir kovodavom visom priemonėm teikdami medicininę pagalbą, tai dabar jau visi esame įsitikinę, kad tai jau yra per vėlu ir kad reikia su jaunimu pradėti kalbėti anksčiau. Ir kalbėjimas tas, ne vien tik tai kalbėjimas, bet jau ir kalbos reikia truputį kitokios, kadangi mūsų, jeigu tai pavadintumėm priešai, kurie dirba intensyviai su reklama, jie yra geriau įvaldę šitą meną, kaip pasiūlyti tą blogąją prekę, kaip ją naudot ir suranda vis naujus būdus, kaip ją pateikti. Tai labai ministras atėjęs pirmom pačiom savo darbo dienom atkreipė dėmesį, kad vis dėlto sveikata tai yra mūsų ateitis profilaktika, yra prevencija. Tai labai jis yra patenkintas ir džiaugiasi, kad tokius renginius organizuoja jau visuomeninės organizacijos, reiškia jau visuomeniai nebėra vienas ir tas pats, kas vyksta su mūsų jaunimu. Tad jo vardu linkiu gero darbo, geros patirties. Taip pat programoje mačiau, kad yra rezoliucija, visi laukiam išmintingos rezoliucijos, pasidalinant gerąją patirtimi Europos. Ir kad galima būtų visiems naudingai padirbėjus paskui sulaukti rezultatų, kuriais galėtume ir džiaugtis. Gero, sėkmingo darbo.
Ačiū labai už sveikinimą. Ir iš tikrųjų norisi labai pasidžiaugti, kad yra daug gerų iniciatyvų ir tie, kas galbūt nelabai sekat, žinot įvykius, iš tikrųjų ministras deda didelės pastangas, kad Lietuvos pirmininkavimo metu būtų susitarta dėl ES tabako produktų direktyvos ir ten iš tikrųjų yra labai sudėtinga situacija. Ir aišku, labai džiaugiamės dėl to, kad po poros metų vėl grįžtam prie alkoholinių gėrimų reklamos draudimo svarstymo ir šį kartą vyriausybė imasi iniciatyvos, jau ne Seimas. Ir iš tikrųjų ministras asmeniškai deda didžiulės pastangas, kad šitie dalykai vyktų. Tai dar kartą labai ačiū už ministerijos sveikinimą ir noriu tik paklausti, galbūt salėje jau yra gerbiamas Seimo narys Rytas Kupčinskas, bet lyg ir nematau. Tai jeigu ne, norėčiau pakviesti šio miesto šeimininkų atstovą. Ir norėčiau paprašyti sveikinimo žodį tarti Marijampolės savivaldybės mero pavaduotoją gerbiamą Sigitą Valančių.
Labą rytą visiems susirinkusiems Marijampolėje. Nežinau, kokiu būdu ir principu buvo pasirinkta Marijampolė, bet tikrai tuo džiaugiamės. Džiaugiamės tuo, kad susipažinau su programa ir turim labai daug užsienio svečių. Ir užsienio svečių yra iš tų valstybių, kur Marijampolė turi susigiminiavusias savivaldybės. tai ir Suomija, ir Norvegija, net 2 savivaldybės, Baltarusija, Soligorskas ir taip toliau galėčiau pavaldinti. Tai linkiu malonaus darbo, malonaus buvimo pirmiausiai Marijampolėje. Jūs šią 2 dienas nagrinėsit labai reikalingą temą apie jaunimo žalingų prevenciją, žalingų įpročių. Tačiau mano supratimu reikia kalbėti ne tik apie jaunimą, reikia kalbėti ir vyresnio amžiaus žmonės, ir apie mano kartos žmonės. Na, gal man jau tos prevencijos nereiks, jau poryt 2 dienos, kada metai laiko kaip nerūkau, tai ačiū Dievui, kad pavyko numesti, bet iš tikrųjų šita prevencija ir jaunimo tarpe, ir vyresnio žmonių tarpe, temos jos yra neišsenkamos. Čia niekada nebus per mažai diskusijų arba patarimų. Linkėdamas gero darbo norėčiau palinkėti, kad tai, ką ir priimsit rezoliuciją, ką jūs ir aptarsite, kad tik nepasibaigtų čia šitų sienų ribose, kad tai turėtų tikrai praktinę naudą jums sugrįžus jūsų atstovaujamuose įstaigose. Na ir pasinaudodamas šeimininko teisėmis kviečiu šiandien po vakarienės būtinai organizatoriai gal padarys, arba jeigu reikia, galim ir padėti, susipažinti su vakarinė Marijampolė. Tikrai turim kuo pasidžiaugti, turim kuo pasigirti, būtinai aplankykite Poezijos parką, aplankykite Vytauto parką. Manau, kad jūs tikrai patirsite malonių įspūdžių. Malonaus jums buvimo Marijampolėje.
Labai ačiū gerbiamą mero pavaduotojui už gražų sveikinimą ir aišku, ačiū labai Marijampolei už tokią gražią ir svetingą aplinką, kurią galim šiandien džiaugtis, ir šiandien, ir rytoj. Ir norėčiau paklausti, ar galbūt salėje yra gerbiama Loreta Šoklienė, bet kiek žinau, irgi turbūt ne. Tai tuomet dar kartą ačiū visiems sveikinusiems. Ir leiskit pereiti prie darbinės mūsų konferencijos dalies ir pradėsime pirmąją plenarinę sesiją. Ir pirmajam pranešimui norėsiu pakviesti atstovę iš Suomijos ir iš tikrųjų noriu pasidžiaugti, kad su Suomija turim tikrai ilgą bendradarbiavimo patirtį daugybėje sričių ir organizuojant bendrus konkursus tiek suaugusiems, tiek vaikam. Yra buvęs toks Enipat tinklas, vykdavo konkursai Mesk ir laimėsi ir panašus dalykai. Visą tai vykdavo bendraujant, bendradarbiaujant su institucija, kurios atstovę šiandien jūs išgirsit kalbant. Tai pranešimai norėčiau pakviesti Kristiną Hanulą. Ir jinai pasidalins Suomijos patirtimi, vykdant kompleksinę jaunimo rūkymo prevenciją, mokyklos berūkančiųjų ir kalbės apie priemonės profesionalams. So please, Kristina, floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be here. Hello everybody. So I'll tell you a little bit about our experience in smoking prevention among youth. This is quite a complex area, like you know, at least if you work at school. First of all, I'll tell you something about our organization. So I work in EHUT, Finnish Association for Substance Abuse Prevention. We work with children and young people, as well with working-aged and pension-aged people in all over the Finland. In addition to preventive work in alcohol, tobacco, and drug-related issues, we promote substance-free traffic and also positive culture in digital games and gambling, because they are also very big problems, at least in Finland. Our organization is quite new one. EHUT was founded last year, but we used to be 3 NGOs before, but now we are quite a big organization in Finland. Actually, we have 70 employees right now, and we work, as I said, all over the Finland. We work as experts in the field, but our work is based on the values and activities of about 100 members organizations. And the volunteers who are working in those organizations, it's very important for us. We also coordinate preventive substance abuse work in Finland. And in this network, there is more than 30 organizations in Finland. So we work together. It's also important for us. When we talk about people, we meet them in many different ways. Face-to-face, for example, at the schools, but also online and through mobile phones also. Like we know, almost everybody has his or her mobile phone. So it's a very good way to reach young people. So, for example, we do have plays which they can play and gather information, for example, about smoking or how important it is not to smoke. So we work with young people, but as well it's very important to work with professionals who are working in educational communities, as well as leisure activity organizations, and of course we are not able to, we must remember also parents. It's very, very useful to work through them also. But about smoking, here are some statistics. It's good to know some backgrounds. Prevalence of daily smoking in Finland has really decreased, like you can see. Finland has been among the world's pioneer countries in tobacco policy since 1976, when the first Tobacco Act was passed. Studies indicate that this Tobacco Act has influenced the reduction of smoking among the general population, and the implementation of the law has been very successful. Like you can see, there is not so much gender differences anymore, but there is some socioeconomic differences, like you can see. So if the people, if they have low or high education, so there is differences how much they are smoking. Development is the same kind when we talk about young people. Like you can see, it's about 15% of the young people who are smoking right now in Finland. Of course, there is differences between the age groups. But like I said, there is differences between socioeconomic area. So, for example, those young people who studies in trade schools or vocational schools, how do you pronounce them? There's more than 35% who are smoking. And if we compare it with a high school percent, it's less than 10%. So there is a problem we should do something about. And also there is a problem with so-called new things. Snus is a very big problem in Finland. Sweden, of course, is our neighbor country, and it gives our some kind of problems. Sorry, I have to say it. Yeah, and this is something we do work, and we hear every day information from schools that something should be done. Also, electronic cigarettes and water pipe is surprisingly common nowadays in Finland, like you can see. About, for example, electronic cigarettes, when you are 18 years old, almost 30% of them have tried electronic cigarettes. So, What we do in this situation in Finland, our smoke-free actions. One of our employees has said that preventive substance abuse work should give young people tools to seek what they also seek with their substance use, only in a better and more sustainable form. And I think it's a very good sentence, and it's something we should remember. So we should give something for young people in that way that they don't want to drink alcohol or they don't want to smoke. So our smoke-free project is a school-based smoking prevention project, and it's targeted mainly at the pupils and the students in lower and upper secondary schools and vocational schools in all over the Finland. This project is funded by Finland's Slots Machine Association, RAI, and we work closely with the Cancer Society of Finland. So, like I said, it's useful to work together. The aims of this project are to promote not smoking and not using snus among young people, to prevent starting smoking and the use of snus, and early intervention. We need to do a lot even before they smoke. And if there is somebody who is smoking already, we have to support young people in quitting smoking. We are not able to leave them alone. And all in all, we try to support the well-being work of schools as a whole. In Finland, the health education is a subject in all grades, and I think it's very, very important thing. But however, we need to discuss about these things also in other subjects. For example, in English lessons, it's very useful to talk about smoking, not only in health education lessons. So in this way, smoking is a common thing. We should do it together. How to prevent it. When we talk about smoke-free project in Finland, so the central and often the best known form of the smoke-free project is the competition. The competition is aimed at young people between 12 and 15 years old. This competition has been already in Finland since 1989. So it's very old competition and very old way to reach young people. However, we have found that there is a purpose for this competition. So, right now, a few weeks ago, this competition started in lower secondary schools, and elementary schools will start the competition in next week, actually. So all classes who are in this competition commit to not smoking, using snus or electronic cigarettes. Like you notice, when we have noticed that electronic cigarettes are a problem in Finland, we have taken also those projects into this competition. After this half-year competition period, classes that kept with it return as called We Stayed Smoke-Free form, and afterwards the winners of the money prizes are raffled off among the returned forms. During the competition there is also some kind of little awards, chewing gums and all that kind of things, which are given to the classes who are in this competition. In that way we can talk about smoking or how you should not to smoke in all situations. So In this way, more than 1,000 classes from all over Finland are involved in this competition. So it's almost 20,000 young people, pupils, who are in this competition. And like I said, this competition has been there already quite many years. And when you remember those figures, how smoking has developed in Finland, so it's very good action, at least one action, to that aim that nobody is smoking. In the future, we hope that we can reach with this competition also those who are in 5th or 6th grades. But of course we need money for that, because there is quite many pupils also in that age area. But we're trying to do that already in next year. But not only competition, there is also other actions in this smoke-free project. And we actually even give money for schools. And with that money, they can create different kind of, well, whatever they want to do. But those things should be done by the non-smoking viewpoint. So, for example, they have decided to do something with when they are not in lessons, so they have something to do together. We also produce materials and training education for teachers, and through those educations, teachers get more information how they can reach pupils' mind in a way and tell them more information about smoking. Like I said, it's a very useful way to work with pupils, also talk with parents. And our experts also go to the schools and they talk with parents. They talk how they should be in their young people's lives in normal life. And like I said, we also meet youngsters in social media. So, for example, if they are in some hobby social media, so our experts are also there, and they give answers for young peoples if somebody is if some things bothers them. About materials, the Cancer Society of Finland has produced this very popular tool for professionals, but also for teenagers, to find out what happens when you smoke. So this material gives you a way to see how tobacco would change people. And you can by yourself find out what it does. I have some video clip here. I just hope that it works, so you can see what I mean. Just yesterday I heard that in this website there has been more than 2.5 million visitors already. So it has been very, very successful. And like you noticed, it has been done also in English, in Swedish also. So it's very useful tool. So just check it out if you want. But this is only one material which have been created, and well, there is plenty of them, but of course this is in English, so that's why I tell you about it. Prevention is very important, like it has been said already. But also those kids who are smoking, they should not be left alone. So we also give some tips for quitters, and in our websites there is also a list of various forms of support which young people can find. So don't leave them alone, even if they smoke. In Finland, we don't have enough money in this supporting thing, but I hope that in future we'll do have it. And why we should have it? Because in Finland we have tobacco-free 2040 thing, you could say. This Tobacco-Free Finland 240 is a registered trademark which promotes the tobacco-free society as a positive goal. Most importantly, the network gathers together all the main players in tobacco control in Finland. The network ensures information sharing, multi-sectoral expertise and cooperation. And what is the very important thing, so politicians are also in this. They think this is good thing too. So we really think that our aim is to end the consumption of tobacco products since 2040. I know it's quite big aim, but I really hope that we should do that. If we can reach it, tobacco use should reduce by 10% annually. But like you remembered, the figures are quite good ones already now. So we should do quite many things. And also about these things we should tell for young people. And one way is, again, the video clip, which I'll show you to this end of my presentation.
I'm so glad that tobacco advertising isn't allowed anymore. I wish workplaces were smoke-free too.
That's never going to happen. A smoke-free working place? No way.
It's so wonderful that workplaces are now smoke-free. I wish smoking was forbidden in restaurants as well.
That's not possible. Smoking is an inseparable part of restaurants.
What do you say, Eric? Restaurants are smoke-free at last. But I wish tobacco products weren't on display anywhere, not even in stores.
No chance. That would cause extra expenses for shops and prolong queues at the checkout.
See? Tobacco products are no longer on display, tempting young people in the shops. What if smoking in public places was forbidden too?
I very much doubt that would ever be possible.
Wonderful! Now there is no smoke here either. Listen, Eric, balconies and buildings should be smoke-free too.
Don't you think that's too much?
It's so nice that smoke from balconies is no longer a problem in flats. All of Finland should be smoke-free, don't you think?
I suppose nothing's impossible, but I'll eat my hat if Finland becomes smoke-free.
Eric, now that all of Finland is smoke-free, our children and grandchildren can live in a clean environment at last.
You were right about smokelessness. I guess I have to congratulate you.
So, working together is a big word. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, very much for sharing with us story of long and I think very successful Finland tobacco control. Ačiū dar kartą pranešėjai ir po pranešimo mes klausimų turbūt neužduosim, turim truputį numatę laiko pabaigoje sesijos, tai tie, kas norėsit paklausti pranešėjų, tą progą dar turėsit. O dabar norėčiau pakviesti antrajam pranešimui Arni Einarsson, kuris yra Reikjaviko alkoholio ir narkotikų prevencijos informacijos centro generalinis direktorius ir tuo pat metu yra Šiaurės šalių narkotikų ir alkoholio kontrolės tinklo Nordan valdybos narys. So it's my pleasure, Arni, to see you here in Lithuania, and I hope you will share experience what you have done in Iceland, which I see as an example country for many of the European countries. So please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Aurelius, and good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here, honored by your invitation to this conference. I will try to be very practical in my short presentations. I only want to give you some example of how we do see prevention, how we define prevention, not only as education, but also as quite many other social measures. I'll be brief, but I hope you will get some glimpse of how we look at this issue. I first only briefly give you some information on my country, and then I will shortly mention some of the important issues of prevention. I'll mention some of what research is telling us is influential and effective in youth prevention, and then in the end I'm going to run very quickly through some slides, some figures where I show you the situation and the development in alcohol and drug use among young people in Iceland, and I'll compare it also with the other Nordic countries as well as Lithuania. So what is now happening? There it is. Some information about my country. It's a small country, even though it's almost 50% larger than Lithuania. And the population is, but the population is only about half of the population in Vilnius. So you see, this is a very small country. This is why am I mentioning this? I'm doing it because this has a lot of advantages for prevention. It means that all distances between people are short. We are very close, and it's also sometimes it's made as a joke that we know each other, all of us. But unfortunately, that's not the case. But we know quite many, although. And that is very important, especially when you are talking about policy making, and you are talking about implementation, and you are talking about activating people when you have these short distances and close relationships between people. We have a very homogeneous population or culture. That's also important. because we more or less speak the same language. And then I'm talking about the social language. We have more or less the same values, same beliefs, and so on. And this is also important for prevention, because culture, how we look at things, is so important. I think it can be said that we can do the same things everywhere, but not in the same way. And that's important when we see new things. We maybe see them as impossible for our own environment, for our own societies. But I believe everything can be done, but we have to do it differently. And we have few media, although quite many considering how few we are. And this also is important because we are getting the same message more or less. So in a way it's cheaper for us to go through media than, for example, for you here in Lithuania. Because if we can activate one media, the others follow. And that's how we play it more or less. And we have most of our municipalities are very small. And this is very, very important for us in our preventive work. And we use it very systematically, this fact that we have small municipalities. And now only few things research has taught us that are effective in prevention, and especially youth prevention. First of all, it's availability, access, how easy it is to be able to buy or consume or to get the different drugs. It may be alcohol, tobacco, or illicit drugs. And there we have age limits, and we have price as a very powerful tools in this connection, in this context. And then general attitude in society. Does people support what we are doing? Are they against what we are doing? And this is very important. And this is probably the starting point in all prevention. We have to have people on our side. So we have to sort of cultivate the soil before we start sowing. And of course, and this is often overlooked, that the general alcohol consumption and smoking by adults, because the general behavior in society is of course what our kids are looking at. When they are preparing themselves for life, we are the ones who give them, we are leading the way for them. So if we are drinking in all occasions and we cannot go out to have fun without drinking, of course this is a very clear message and a very strong message, which can be quite difficult to sort of neutralize, whether it is through education or other means. And then we have parental awareness, attitude and behavior. And then I'm not only talking about society as a whole, but the homes, how the relationship between kids and the parents are. And then encouragement and access to healthy and meaningful activities. Do we give our kids a chance to do meaningful things, or do we leave them to the streets? Do we offer them leisure time activities, sports, and so on? And then we have the school environment, the school culture as a whole. and then marketing, advertisement, or I would even say propaganda. And then now I'm going to just give you some examples of how we are doing this in my country. And this, of course, is not any thing we do only in Iceland. This is done in many, many other countries, maybe all countries who are at all working with prevention. But what I'm trying to do is to show you that prevention is a comprehensive approach. It cannot be done in one single way, with one single method. And that's what I am trying to show you here. Some of what I'm going to show you may look rather odd, and you might think we cannot do this in our countries, in our societies, in our culture. But I believe we can. It takes time, and each of you have to find your own ways. Prevention has a very, very long history in Iceland, especially regarding tobacco prevention, as Kristina was talking about just before. And we have made quite a good progress, and that's what I'm going to show you in the end. But let us look at some measures we have taken. What about availability or access? Alcohol is only sold in monopolies and restaurants and bars. You cannot buy alcohol in ordinary stores in Iceland. And we have a state monopoly in alcohol, and we had it for a very, very long time, and we supported the whole nation is supporting very strongly our monopoly. We have 20 years age limit for alcohol, for buying alcohol, and 18 years for tobacco. And alcohol and tobacco is very expensive. We have high taxes, and we have been raising the taxes now every year for the last 5 years. And we got a new government just a few months ago, and they have already announced they will go on raising alcohol and tobacco taxes. And that's something we are very happy about, because we know that this measure, this tool is very effective. And then smoking in restaurants and bars is forbidden. And we don't see a smokeless Iceland as an impossible future. We see it even coming very close, very soon, and I'll show you that also later in my figures. Then about general attitude in society. As I mentioned, it's very important that we have people with us. And most of the times, as Kristina showed in her presentations in the end, we may believe this is impossible. We will never get there, but we will get there if we work hard on it. Then about general attitude. There is a very general support for existing alcohol and drug policy. We want to keep our alcohol monopoly. We want to, and it's an odd thing to say, but we want alcohol to be expensive. The vast majority of the people want alcohol to be expensive. And then, just to mention some other things I'm mentioning here, restrictions on youth being outdoors. This was a struggle in the beginning to ban young people to be on the streets, to be outside whenever they wanted to. But now we all support this. And we support this because we see this as a good tool to be able to reach children and to sort of keep them away from risky situations. And now parents are very strict on this, and not with their own kids. I might be walking on the street and I see some young person outside, which I think should be at home now, and I might turn to that kid and say, well, I don't think you're supposed to be here right now. I think you should go home. I might even call your parents and such things. And it's also important, we believe, at least, is that alcohol and drug treatment is very accessible in Iceland, and we have very strong AA. And this means that we get a strong support from this side. We get a strong support from people who have on their own skin experienced alcoholism or drug addiction. And that's also important for us. They are a good alliance. And there's a strong support for not drinking during work hours. It's not a tradition to go out during lunchtime and have a beer. We don't like that. It is increasing, and it might come into our culture, but right now it is not. It's not support for it. We have blood alcohol concentration limits in the traffic, 0.5 promille, and now we are working on raising it up to 0.8 promille, as it is in Sweden, I believe, and maybe some other countries. And then we have what we call a legal competence, and it's obtained at the age of 18, which means that we can interfere quite much with young people up to the age of 18, but at the same time they also have quite many rights. So it's not only about taking something away from them, they also get something back. Especially when we are talking about young people in drug and alcohol problems, this is important. We can interfere on the based on that they still are children. So this is a helpful tool. Then what about general consumption and smoking? As I said, the kids look at what the adults are doing. And as you see, that the total alcohol consumption is relatively low in Iceland. It's the lowest. It's among Norway. We have the lowest total alcohol consumption, even though it's very general. About 90% of adults drink to some extent. And smoking is very low. Now we are. The last measure from last year shows us that people in the age group 15 to 80, only 13.8% are smoking daily. And this number was 30% in 1991. And it has been going down very, very steady for many, many years. So a smoke-free Iceland is not far away. And what about parents? We have in all our schools, both elementary schools for 6 to 16 and for secondary schools for 16 to 20, we have parents' organizations. They are NGOs, they are non-governmental organizations. And we also have what we call parental or parent councils in all these schools. They are more official. They are more meant to monitoring regulations, monitoring school policy and such things. And I think, no, I don't think, I state that parents' work and how well it has been organized within our elementary schools is playing a vital role in our prevention and explains much of our good results, because they have carried the burden, they have brought this progress forward. And then we have class cooperation between parents in children in the same class. And we have a strange thing. I don't know if you have it also in some other countries. We call it a parent stroll, which means that parents in a particular school might meet Friday evening or Saturday evening, and they take a walk together in their neighborhood. And they even, and now they have are connected to the local police or the local social authorities in that municipality. So if something is going on, something they don't like, they might announce it. They might even find parents' names in the phone books. They might be standing in front of a house and something is going on wild. They will not go and knock on the door, but they might find out who is living in this house. And I'm going to call and see if this is what's going on is done. Is this permitted by the parents or by the people living there? And the kids know this, and they don't like to be picked up by a group of parents, maybe dressed in yellow coats or something like that. And also, it has shown that those who are trying to sell drugs to young people, they don't like it either, because they don't like to meet a group of scary yellow-dressed people who might call the police right away and even take down the license number on the cars, or even take pictures of them if they get close enough. So they are behaving like maybe a little bit like a police. But we say as parents, this is our neighborhood. So we would like to have something to say about what is happening here. We are not only leaving it to the police or to someone outside our area. And then what about healthy and meaningful activities? What are we offering the young people? First, we have a very general participation in sports and leisure activities. If you look at the kids in elementary schools, they're over 80% taking part in some kind of leisure activity or sports. And municipalities, they offer what we call leisure activity grants, which means that every kid in the age of 6 to 16 can go to the municipality and ask for this grant. They can use it for paying a fee to the sport club or to the art school or whatever they want to do. And this can be quite a good sum. If I am calculating correctly, the highest amounts are equal to 200 euros for each kid a year. So we are doing this because we don't want money to be a hindrance. We don't want money to keep our kids away from these possibilities. And then we have a very, very strong NGO, non-governmental organizations, cooperation, as it is also in all the Nordic countries, in this field, in prevention. and NGOs have been leading the way. They have been carrying the wagon from the beginning, and this has also made a huge impact in this area. Then school environment. Many elementary schools have a special prevention plan, and all secondary schools have a prevention plan, which includes tobacco prevention, alcohol and drug prevention, and other kinds of health issues. We have education for our students. It's mandatory for elementary and secondary schools. And now, for the last 4 years, we have been working on a program called Health Promoting Schools, covering all the 3 stages: kindergarten, primary schools, and secondary schools. And there, alcohol, tobacco, and drugs are included. And these 2 last things, we have in all schools we have prevention plans against bullying, and we have support for learning disabled. Why is this important? Yes, we see it very clearly when we look at, for example, young people who have alcohol and drug problems. They have a history of being bullied in the school. They have a history of learning problems in the schools. And also, when we look at prisoners, we see the same. We see they have this experience. So what we are trying to do is to already in the schools to meet them, to try to not maybe solve their problems, but at least to meet their needs. Then marketing, advertisement. We have a total ban on alcohol and tobacco advertisements, but we don't think it's functioning properly. And we have tried through our parliament for probably 10 years to do something about it, but we have not succeeded yet, but we will continue until this will be done in a way that this ad ban is working as we want it to be working. And we have a very active parents' organization against alcohol marketing. This is their only issue. This is the only thing they are working on. So they announce every incident of law breaking in this field. Okay, this is the last slide I'm going to show you to show how we look at or how we approach this issue of youth prevention. I'm now going to very quickly to run through some slides. Don't worry, I'm just trying to show you the trends in these pictures, not to read them all carefully. You may, some of you at least, know about the European Survey Project on alcohol and drugs, the so-called ESPAT surveys, done by quite many countries, and your country here, Lithuania, is among them. And this is a very good tool. They are done every 4th year. You can monitor the changes, the development in each country, and you can also compare countries. And it's possible because this is based on standardized methodology. So what I'm going to do is to run very quickly through some pictures. I want you to just to look at maybe 2 things. The one is to see how the trend is in all the Nordic countries, and I'm including also Lithuania. And I also want you to look at Iceland especially, how the development has been there. Let us start with the lifetime use of cigarettes. This is for kids in 10th grade. They are 15 and 16 years old. And as you see from here, the use of cigarettes has been going down in all these countries. But if you look at Iceland in the middle, you can see it's a steady progress. It's a very nice progress. Each fourth year, these measurements cover, we are going down and we are going down. But this is also the same in the other countries, but might be a little bit different, might be some peaks, some tops, but still we can see where we are going. This is the lifetime use. Then, what about the last 30 days? It's the same. It's going down in all countries, and still in Iceland you can see how nicely this is decreasing all the time. Then, daily cigarette use at the age of 13 or younger, it's the same thing. We are going down in all countries with some peaks, with some tops, but Iceland has been able to go down every period. Now, alcohol. This is a lifetime use of any alcoholic beverage. You can see that in the Nordic countries, there have been decrease. Lithuania, status quo. And now again you see in Iceland, this is a very nice step down, so to speak. This is a lifetime use of alcohol beverage. And then what about the last 12 months? Here again we see more or less the same development, not quite as good in all countries as on the slides before, but still it is improving, and again you see how the stairs for Iceland are very steady. And now, what about those who are using quite a lot of alcohol? This is the use of any alcohol 20 times or more during the last 12 months, means more than once a month. And you still see that same trend. In Lithuania, it went up for a while, but for the last 3 measures, last 12 years, it has been going down as well. Then, what about the last month, the last 30 days? Again, we see the same. And again, Iceland has no peaks. We have been able to continue and continue, and that's important because all setbacks take quite a lot of effort to win again. This is for the very, very heavy group, and who have used 10 times or more the last 30 days. Now we have come to another thing, which, because I read a lot in this ESPAD surveys, we have been able to reach in all countries, especially in Iceland, we have been able to reach what we call the good kids. The kids who are okay, they have a strong social background and they have a lot of possibilities in their lives. But we have not been able to reach the kids at the other end, kids having real problems. And this is what we can read from these figures. We have not been able to change their behavior as we have been able to with the other part. And still, this is the binge drinking group, and we still have the same trend. And then we have the last slide I'm going to show you. This is the lifetime abstinence. This is the kids who don't use any kind of drugs. And you see that we are up to about 40% in that age group in Iceland not using anything at all. They are abstainers. And you see the same trend in other countries. Lithuania is still status quo in that sense. So, my friends, I used quite a lot of time, but I was so enthusiastic about it. So I hope you can forgive me. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Arni, very much for your clear and very interesting presentation. And, you know, when I am losing my faith and motivation, I am always looking to Iceland trends, and then I always believe that it's really doable. So what we can see from your presentation. So thank you for this optimistic trend. And now we'll go to the next presentation. Ir dabar norėčiau pakviesti trečiam ir paskutiniam šitos sesijos pranešimui Norvegijos jaunimo centrų asociacijos generalinį sekretorių, profesionalaus atviro darbo su jaunimu Europoje prezidentą, Paul Aisdal Sölberg, kuris paskaitys pranešimą apie Norvegijos jaunimo centrų patirtį vykdant psichoaktyvių medžiagų prevenciją. So please, floor is yours.
Thank you. Let's see if I can find my presentation. No? I sent it before, yeah. Okay. And I'll...
Just a second.
Okay, thank you. My name is Paul Isdal Solberg. I'm the Secretary General of the Norwegian Association of Youth Centers, and I'm also the President of a European organization called POIVE, which is Professional Open Youth Work in Europe. I just have to find my presentation. It's going to take a little bit of time. I'll start anyway. Yeah, okay. Perfect. I was actually going to talk about what we do in the youth centers in Norway, but I also see that I want to tap into a little bit of the things that the earlier speakers talked about, because it has to do with, I think, two things mainly. One thing is that's a very hard approach. What we work with in youth centers are very soft approaches. We work with development of young people, and also you said that it's hard to reach the hard-to-reach kids, the at-risk youth. I'll talk a little bit about how we work with at-risk youth in Norway, and also how we target them in the youth centers. And I think this is a key figure of getting to the last mile. In Norway, we have 722 youth centers. We have 428 municipalities. That means that all the municipalities more or less have a youth center, an open youth center. About 120,000 kids use the youth centers. That sums up to about 1.2 million single visits a year. That means that approximately 15% of all young people between 10 and 18 are using the youth centers on a regular basis. Now, we got some new numbers just a couple of weeks ago, which was quite interesting, and they show that when we only look at the children between 13 and 16, we now have about 40% attendance. That means that over 40% is using the youth centers once a month or more, and 18% are using it more than 5 times a week. And these numbers are quite good for us, of course. Just see if I can find this presentation somewhere. Yeah, perfect. No problem. Just have a little patience with me. See if we can fix this quite easily. Also find the right presentation. So 40% of young people regularly use the youth centers. This is, of course, an opportunity for us to really target youth in the youth centers. Yeah. Most of the people who uses the youth centers are boys, or a majority are boys. Whilst a smaller group is girls. Most of them have a balance, but we know that we target young boys a little bit more than we target young girls. And this is a good thing, because in many of these kind of soft approach, here you are. Perfect. So, see how... Yeah. This is what I'm about to start talking about. 44% has a majority of boys. 49.2 has a balance between boys and girls, but only 6.2 says that they have a majority of girls attending these centers. So what do we actually do in the centers, and how are they placed in our system? I say that when we talk about Open Youth Work in Norway, we talk about the things that happens between school and the child welfare system. The main bulk of young people are involved in sports or NGOs. About 60% are active in sports, but this number drops very radically from the age 13 to 14. In organized sports, young people in Norway fall out from 12 to 14, and then the number is quite low, and the sports are quite elite activity. These young people don't stop being physically active. They start being active in other arenas. They start what we call lifestyle sports, feel-good sports. So they are active in parkour, in skating, in snowboarding, in many other physical activities, dancing, for instance, which is a huge part of the youth centers. But they're not active in sports organizations anymore. So there's an overlap, and very often the youth centers are involved in these non-organized sports. And I think also that that's a sign of young people experimenting with the non-competitive issues in society. They are competing all the time. And we see that the sports that are raising the fastest is the non-competitive sports. Now, the youth centers and self-organized sports are my field of area, and this is where I know most, what I know most about. The youth centers, as I said, organize about 40% of the young people in Norway between 13 and 16, which is our main group. We also have outreach work, or detached youth work, which basically is youth workers that walk the streets and work with young people in the urban environment. And we have youth information centers, places where young people can go to meet either youth workers or healthcare professionals. So these are the blue things are my area, which I call Open Youth Work. And so how does this tap into prevention work? First of all, the tradition in Norway. The first youth center in Norway started in 1953 in Hammersborg. So we have a 60-year anniversary of youth centers in Norway now. Traditionally, we stand on two legs from an ideological point of view. On one side, we've always been working with social work. On the other side, we've been working with cultural work. You can also say that we are on one side preventing and on the other side building building capacities of young people. And we stand somewhere in between informal and non-formal learning. With informal learning, I mean random learning that happens between young people. And with non-formal learning, I would mean facilitated learning. For example, how I define these two is I play the guitar, and I start playing the guitar in the youth center. And the first thing I learned when I was playing the guitar was basically I learned from a guy sitting on the side of me, a young person like me, and he taught me the first thing. And then a youth worker approached me after a while and said, I see that you're playing the guitar, maybe you would like to, we have a guitar lesson that you can attend every Wednesday, and maybe you want to start playing in a band, and I'll help you out with this. And so I went from the informal learning to the non-formal learning. And this is also the history of youth work in Norway. In 1953, basically what we saw was that the youth centers were mainly just open houses, and the youth worker was a janitor that let the young people in. We just wanted to get them off the street. But now the youth workers are actively engaged in facilitating learning experiences for young people. We call it a place to be and a place to learn. And there's not a very clear profile of the youth centers. I don't think there's a clear profile of any youth centers. They place themselves somewhere in between informal and non-formal learning. There's still an opportunity for young people just to be at the youth center without having to go into learning activities. And we also have centers that focus very strongly on social work, especially maybe in the big cities, where we have areas with different kind of very targeted problems. We have areas with drug and alcohol-related problems. We have areas with a very high density of immigration that needs another approach. And we have places that say that we don't do social work at all, we only do cultural work. So there's a huge variety, and I think there are 722 ways to organize this in Norway. So I already talked a little bit about who uses them. I'll skip through this quite fast. The main users are between 11, 14, 15, and 16. The main users are 14 to 16. Those are the people attending youth centers the most. In Norway, we define youth from 13 to 18. Now, I know that many others will say youth is up to 26, but in Norway, it follows the legal age of 18. When we started youth work in Norway, one of the ideas was that my organization, the Norwegian Association of Youth Centers, were supposed to be the voice of unorganized youth. So it's always been talking about the unorganized youth that doesn't do much. The reality is that the people used in the youth centers are not unorganized. They are active in many other arenas. They are most of them are active in more than one other organization, or in sports, or in hobby activities. So, if we look at the profile of the young people that actually use the youth centers, we see that everybody uses the youth centers. All measures of life use the youth centers, but there is an overrepresentation of kids at risk, or children at risk. Slight overrepresentation. And what do we mean with that? It's not the best word in the world. With that, we mean that the social indicators that we can read from the statistics, how many books do their parents have at home? Do they own a car? Do they go on vacations? Do the children have their own bedrooms, or are they all bundled together? These indicators tell us that we reach some people that we would define as at risk from social indicators. Again, we reach slightly more boys than girls, which is a good thing in many ways. And we also reach immigrant boys, which is not the easiest group to reach in Norway. We have done some studies on what is the effect of youth centers in Norway. And one of the study we did from 2006 to 2009, it was a 3-year study, where we saw, and basically what we did was, we looked at not only if the youth centers could help to improve on alcohol use especially, alcohol and cannabis, which is the two main problems in Norway. That means alcohol is the huge problem. All other drugs are very, very small problems. But from the other drug reviews, cannabis is the most used. We looked into 11 youth centers together with a research facility, and we did training of the youth workers to see not only if the youth centers, the work the youth centers did was, we know that the at-risk youth that uses the youth centers uses less alcohol and drugs than other at-risk youth. So the at-risk youth that are actively engaging with the youth workers uses less than the at-risk youth that are not engaging with youth workers. And we also went in and we trained the youth workers in early intervention. We trained them in methods for speaking to young people about alcohol, speaking to young people about drug use. And also we talked about what I want to say a little bit more about later is children at risk when it comes to violence in close relations and mental illness. And we saw that when we raise the level of knowledge the youth worker has, the impact also raises. So when we train the youth workers, there's a direct impact on how the young people use drugs and alcohol. And now, every time you put young people in a room together, basically you will have a chance that there will be a rise in alcohol consumption. So it's really good result just to show that it can reduce alcohol consumption. What we also saw was there is a high level of trust between the youth worker and the youth. When the kids who use the youth centers more than 3 times a month are asked who would you speak to if you had any problems, everybody would say their friends on top, of course. Their peers would always be on top. Then they would say their mother, and then they would say their father, and then they would say the youth worker. And some of the other, like what we would consider significant others in the young people's life, trainers or teachers, they come quite far way down the list. And this has to do with the method you use. You use a very open method, you use a very non-formal method. And I think the methodology that lies in the youth work is inviting young people into a trustful relationship. And I see this as a huge opportunity for preventive work. When you have a very trustworthy relationship, you also have a huge impact. We also see that school dropouts stay in the youth centers of a period after they drop out of school. And this is also interesting. It's not a long period, it's 3 or 4 months. But when they have dropped out of school, they still stay in the youth centers for a while. Then they drop out of basically the rest of society also, and they get very isolated. So there's a window of opportunity where we can catch young people before they drop completely out of society. And together also with some English researchers, we have been looking at a little bit more meta studies, and it has to do with that the development of emotional and social skills have more impact on a long term than targeting the at-risk behavior itself, the symptoms. So working with young people, giving them a feeling of empowerment, giving them hope for the future, this is the things that have the best effect on a child's health in the long run. And it's a quite soft approach. It's not a very legal approach in Norway. We have, as Iceland, very strict laws on alcohol and tobacco, and you see the numbers are quite comparable. We have no national strategy or policy on youth work or on youth centers. We have many different legal issues and policies that regulate the work, like the Convention of the Rights of the Child. We have poverty plan, big issue, city plans that we work on financing special projects. We have, according to paragraph 12 in the Convention on the Rights of the Children, a lot of participation is a really important part. So there's very few vertical structures that support the youth work on a local level. So most municipalities develop their open youth work locally. So it's very bottom up. This have two effects, I think. Just check my time. When decisions are made as close as young people as possible, and also the prevention plans are made as close to young people as possible, they are well adapted to local needs. And they also represent quite flexible solutions that can easily adapt to changing trends. And we know this with young people, that changing trends is an issue. You know, we can lose 50% of the participants in the youth center in 2 months because we made some bad choices, and it's going to take us 6 months to build it up again. The problem with having a very locally strong foundation is that it develops randomly. The municipalities, we have 428 solutions. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. It's hard to implement national strategies. So when, for instance, when we did a big program on early intervention on alcohol use amongst young children, it was voluntary for the municipalities to participate from an open youth workers center. And really we maybe got to 80%, but we should be in 100. And we also know that if you do not finance the open youth work sufficiently, it can have a negative effect. If you don't have youth workers which are trained enough, they don't have enough money to do good activities, you will end up in a room where attitudes are randomly developed. It's not a process that we run ourselves. It makes sense if you have 100 young people in a room and one youth worker, he's not going to be able to have any influence on these young people. In Norway, it's a given that you don't use alcohol in a youth center. Nobody would talk about that. But if you're not enough staff, if you don't have activities that are interesting for the young people, it can have a negative impact on. So when we have very weak vertical structures, it's important for us to build very strong horizontal structures. And this is maybe the most important thing when it comes to a preventive perspective. It's the cooperation. So in every municipality in Norway, we have something we call SLT, which is a group specially appointed to work with preventive measures amongst young people. These groups consist of the police, the school is there, the child welfare system is represented, we have outreach work, street workers, and we have youth information centers and of course youth centers. Sometimes we also have other activities for young people represented in these groups, cultural hobby schools. But when it comes to the preventive aspect of the SLT teams, I'll give you an example. There's a small city called Vennesla. It's in the south of Norway. Very small city. It's probably 5,000 inhabitants. They had 10 years ago a huge problem with alcohol, with drugs, and also with a neo-Nazi movement that was growing up amongst the young people. It was quite complex issues. And they decided to make like a quick response team. So basically, if one of these institutions, the youth center, the school, the police, met the young people and they saw that I think we might have a problem here, they met with the other institutions within 4 days. And on this meeting, they made a first plan. And they met with the parents and the young person within a week. And then they make a plan for how to have a more positive development of this young child's life. Where basically, for instance, the open youth centers are given the role of, if you do bad in school, it's very often good to do good in another place. So the youth centers could try to identify a competence the young person has and try to build on that. If you even playing computer games, match him up against other young people and try to build positive feelings in the child. The child welfare system goes in to help the family. The police do their thing. And school pays special attention to these young people. So there's a very holistic way of approaching the young person's life. And I think this is one of the key factors in a good local grassroots level prevention work, and especially when I talk about youth at risk. So, I know we're a little bit behind schedule, so I'll try to be quick. The last thing is you said that it's hard to reach the youth at risk. The hard nuts is really hard to find. And I think that in Norway we have some numbers. Children that live with parents that are either mentally ill or alcohol or drug abusers or are living in a violent relationship, that is so severe that it's a real problem, is about 10 to 12%. That means 1 in 10 kids. That's a lot. The children who are raised in these families, about 60% do fine, without any help from the rest of society. About 40% develop atypical behaviors, or symptomatic behaviors that we would like to target. What happens in the brain of a child who lives in these conditions are basically, the brain is undergoing a huge rebuild in the age 12 to maybe 21, where you're trying to connect the impulse control and control center. Young people act on impulse. They don't have the ability to control impulse yet, and this is what you develop during the teenage years. If you live under circumstances where you're always nervously activated, you're always looking out for what's happening around you, you're walking. Basically, you don't get time to develop the impulse control relationship. You basically only are aware of the society around you all the time. We usually call this, I think, ADHD. It's my opinion. We misdiagnose quite a lot of young people. 4 of the symptoms of kids being subject to violence is low impulse control, stress, nervous activation, anxiety, and attention problems, which is the same things we diagnose ADHD with. So how can we help these young people? And I think that's, and how can society help them? I think we know that they live in some certain risk factors, and we can recognize, and youth workers should be able to have knowledge about the risk factors that young people live with. What are you going to look for? What kind of symptoms are you looking for? The risk factors are, of course, being a witness to or a subject to violence. Basically, when we measure post-traumatic stress in children, we can't find a difference if the child has been hit themselves or if they have been a witness to their parents hitting each other. Chaotic, unpredictable homes, isolated often from the rest of society, with a mother that has a mental problem or a father who's drinking, or these are complex situations. What we can do is we can build protective measurements around these kids that can help to balance the risk measures. We can make sure that they have healthy care. When they're young, you have the daycare centers in Lithuania who can provide some of these things. But maybe most importantly, you can make sure that they have a significant other in their life, that they have a teacher they trust, that they have a youth worker they trust, that they have their grandmother close to them. You can make the chaos, the unpredictability more understandable. You can empower them. You can give them the feeling that they are worth something. And they can get behavioral feedback. And I think behavioral feedback you get from your teachers, your youth workers. If you're not getting behavioral feedback from your parents, you're not going to get it you have to get it from somewhere else. So I think this is the way we can target at-risk youth. I wasn't planning on talking about that last bit, but it's a little bit engaging. I think I'll finish here. And if you have any questions, I will stay for the rest of the day, I think.
Thank you very much for sharing this experience with us, and that happened that some years ago Lithuania had also quite the same initiatives to start with youth centers, but unfortunately that didn't really survive. So probably we are on the way to doing the same things maybe in the next years and taking your experience as a background. So thank you once again. Kągi, mes iš tikrųjų vėluojam su laiku, bet mes turim dar vieną svečią, kuris nespėjo į pirmąją dalį, bet labai norėtų pasveikinti šitos konferencijos dalyvius. Tai aš noriu pakviesti gerbiamą Seimo narį Rytą Kupčinską pasveikinti konferencijos dalyvius. Prašom.
Labadiena, gerbiami pirmininkaujantis šios konferencijos svečiai, dalyviai. Man tikrai tenka didelė garbė pasveikinčią labai gausiai atstovaujamą konferenciją, nepaprastais mūsų visuomeniai, tautai ir valstybei svarbiais klausimais. Džiugu, kad Lietuvos pirmininkavimo metu kaip tik tai į šitą sferą, į šitą sritį kreipiamas nepaprastai didelis dėmesys. Dėkoju daktarui Aurelijui Verygai ir Algirdui Jankauskui, kurie pirmininkauja. Jo labiau, kad aš čia ne pirmą kartą ir man džiugu, kad vyskupo Motiejaus Valančiaus draugija, jos Marijampolės, Kazlų Rūdos skyriai nekartą kiekvienais metais organizuoja atitinkamas konferencijas ir jų iniciatyva tik tai rodo tikrai gražų nusiteikimą mūsų tautos gerovės labui. Tikrai norėčiau taip pat savo kolegos Seimo nario Algirdo Patacko perduoti jums sveikinimus, ir mes kartu atvykę su Nijolė Balčiūnienė, abudu Lietuvos Sąjūdžio tarybos nariai, irgi nuoširdžiai jūs sveikina. Dėkojam už jūsų pasiaukojimą, pasišventimą ir manau, kad šios konferencijos metu, kada tikrai labai gera praktika mūsų draugų, mūsų šiaurės šalių atstovų tikrai irgi pateikiama šioje konferencijoje. Manau, kad tik tai bendras ir savanorių, nevyriausybinių organizacijų, valstybės institucijų sutelktos pastangos, bendras darbas gali atnešti nepaprastai sėkmingą šios veiklos rezultatą ir vis dėlto, kuris yra nepaprastai reikšmingas mūsų tautos ateičiai ir tautos išlikimui. Taigi aš dar kartą visus nuoširdžiai sveikinu, dėkoju ir dar vieną dalyką, kad norėčiau priminti, kad vis tik tai nepaisant visų šių gražių dalykų, turime irgi atkreipti dėmesį ir tas negatyvus, kas irgi veikia tų žalingų įpročių sklaidą mūsų visuomeniai. Taigi čia visas kompleksas dalykų, kada ne tik tai mes, entuziastai, savanoriai, valstybės institucijos, bet kartu turėtume suprasti, kaip reikia kovoti prieš tuos, kurie vis dėlto stengiasi visuomeniai tuos žalingus įpročius plėsti ir tuo daryti didelę žalą valstybei ir tautai. Taigi nuoširdžiai sveikinu, dėkoju ir dėkoju pranešėjams už labai rimtus ir labai reikšmingus pranešimus. O Algirdas Patackas norėtų įteikti savo knygą, kadangi šiemet mes švenčiame ir Lietuvos Sąjūdžio 25-metį, tai Algirdui Jankauskui norėčiau įteikti Algirdo Patacko knygą Pastogės Lietuva. Geros kloties, gero darbo, ačiū Jums už Jūsų veiklą.
Ačiū gerbiamam Seimo nariui už gražius sveikinimus ir nors ir vėluojam, bet vis dėlto konferencija yra konferencija ir galbūt būtų norinčių užduoti 1-2 labai trumpus klausimus pranešėjam. Yra, matau ranką. Tik prašom stengtis labai trumpai, gerai?
Labą dieną. Aš norėčiau užduoti klausimus turbūt visiems 3 pranešėjams. Kur turėtų tos vertėjus? Sakė, kad aš tyliai kalbėčiau, kad greičiau spėtų išvers mane. Kur tos vertėjus, kad yra? ar verčia dabar tiem užsieniečiams čia? Tai va, mano būtų pirmas klausimas šitai moteriai, va, iš Suomijos, kuri buvo. Ar kaip yra skatinami tie žmonės, kurie tampa nerūkančiais, kadangi buvo kalbama, kad jie praveda ten darbą su jaunimu, bet kaip skatinami būtent tie žmonės, kurie tapo, arba jaunimas, kurie tapo nerūkančiais, tai būtų pirmas klausimas. Po to klausimas būtų, užmiršau, ten buvo ne iš Norvegijos, iš kokios šalies buvo, iš Islandijos jom. Ten buvo žmogus kalbėjo, kad prieiga prie psichotropinių medžiagų. Aš čia bisklinčiau įsiplėsti iš tam klausime, nes kalbama apie oficialią statistiką, aš kaip matau, apie skaičius, bet ar yra jūsų šalyje aplamai nelegali prekyba alkoholiu, nes pas mus šalyje tai tas yra, ir matau, kad čia skaičiai tik tai tie, aš suprantu, kurie yra parduotuvėse, va. Ir kas liečia prieiga prie psichotropinių medžiagų, tai va, pavyzdžiui, mūsų kaime nelegalus alkoholio prekybos taškai nustojo prekiauti po 10 valandų vakarų, kas reiškia, jie nenori pažeisti įstatymų, mūsų valstybė priimtų. Tai va, ar jūsų šalyse tas yra toks dalykas, ar yra, mane domina. Ir dar vienas klausimas būtų šitai. Vat iš Norvegijos vaikinas, tas kur buvo tas jaunimo tas lyderis. Kaip jie pakėlė socialinių darbuotojų profesionalų lygį, vat mane domina. Jisai pasako, kad mes pakėlėm, bet kaip jie tai padarė? Nes ta problema ir mūsų šalyje yra, aš suprantu. Ačiū.
Ačiū. So, Christina, maybe you was the first named. Maybe you can answer.
Okay, thank you. I think that the most important thing is that you should not say to young people that you should not smoke. Oh. So don't say that don't smoke. You just need to find the way that in which way young people can think by themselves why it's good not to be non-smoker. So don't say don't, just live with them, and yeah, I think it's the best way.
Thank you, Christina. And then I think Arne was the second named in the question.
Yes, of course, in these numbers I did show you, we cannot include all alcohol, but let me remind you that Iceland is an island quite far away from other countries, which means that you can come by air, and our airfields are very well monitored in that way, and then also we have ships coming from abroad. So there is, compared to especially the European countries, of course Iceland is a European country, but in the continent here, it's easier to smuggle, to bring alcohol over the borders than in Iceland. So in all the figures I've seen in this area, there is less illegal import and illegal consumed alcohol than in Iceland than in other countries.
Ačiū. Arne, aš norėčiau gal tik tai pridėti, kad iš tikrųjų jūs gal galit suabejoti skaičiais, kurie rodo suvartojimą, bet kur yra klausiama, kiek procentų vartoja, vaikų niekas neklausia, kokį vartoja. Jų klausia tiesiog, kiek jų yra apskritai vartojančių, bet kokį alkoholinį gėrimą ar cigaretes. Tai dėl šitų skaičių, manau, nėra net ir klausima. Kadangi jų apskritai mažai vartojančių, tai natūralu, kad bet kokį gėrimą jie išgeria labai nedaug. So the last question is to our Norwegian guest.
Well, thanks. The question was how do we work to raise the competences of youth workers and social workers, and of course we do it with all the normal methods. We do it through formal education in the universities and university high schools. My organization does a lot of trainings. We do about 60 training days a year for youth workers. We also have online training resources. We have magazines for youth workers where we talk about these issues. We're actually now developing a program together with Lithuania to do trainings of youth workers and daycare centers in Lithuania through the EEA program. So we're trying to take some of the training material that we have and also translate to Lithuanian.
Thank you very much. Kągi, ačiū dar kartą visiems pranešėjams. Ačiū visiems klausiusiems ir dabar kavos pertrauka ir susirenkam atgal į salę po 15 minučių. Skanios kavos.